The last few weeks we, perhaps out of necessity, have talked about the intersection of faith and politics. And sometimes you can have a conversation or even offer a soliloquy, be unsure of the grammar that the other person in the room is employing. And so this week I felt like it would be helpful to begin to step back a little, to talk about Christian history, the intersection of faith and politics, the nature of belief. Indeed, I intend to wrap up about 1,700 years of history, talk about the nature of belief, the current intersection of faith and politics, and do that in 15 minutes. So I might leave out a detail or two along the way. Now, the 28th of October, 312, is a date that may not be that familiar to most of us, but it has had a direct effect on the way we live our lives. The Battle of the Milvian Bridge took place on that date in 312 between the Roman emperors Constantine and Maxentius. Legend says that Constantine, on the night before the battle, had a dream where a cross appeared in the heavens to him, and he heard a voice that told him that he would win the battle on the bridge if he used the cross as his standard, which he did. He won the battle, and he attributed the victory to the God of Christianity. The Chi-Rho, the first two letters of the word Christos, would become the symbol of the Roman Empire after 312. Christianity would become the bonding agent, the super glue that would hold the empire together in Constantine's mind. Now, in order to do that, he had to codify a number of beliefs. He had to make sure that when people said that they were following this particular God, that they all meant the same thing. Now, it's much more complicated than this, but this is where we get the Nicene Creed from. And the Nicene Creed is one of the greatest miracles in the history of the world, although not for the reasons necessarily that you may think. Even if you don't like the Nicene Creed or creeds in general, and that's a very modern take, isn't it? Feeling like the creeds have limited value or I could take or leave them. One might admit that the Nicene Creed is a particular kind of miracle because the Emperor Constantine had church people, clerics, scholars, all come essentially to the same place, and under the gaze of the emperor, under the emperor's roof, they sought to codify Christian belief across the empire and help people fall under a similar ideal. So those scholars created a creed and a set of beliefs that attempted to assert that Jesus Christ was the ultimate authority, was the Son of God, and that the emperor was not the Son of God. The miracle here is that they did this, and these people left the building with their heads still attached to their necks. And therefore we believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, begotten of the Father, and so on. And now we have a melding together of church and state and a codification of what you ought to believe. And whether you believe it becomes incredibly important. Let's just think about the importance of that for a second. 1,700 years ago, it was not what you did, it was not the act of mercy that you extended to somebody else, but it was what you claimed to believe that counted when determining who or what belonged. Consider how dangerous that would become when religion was then used as the oil to grease the wheels of plunder or xenophobia. So this melding together is often called Constantinianism. And that's not to say that the effects of Constantinianism were terrible in their entirety. Constantinianism, after all, provided safe harbor for Christians. No more persecution inside the empire. Diocletian, the emperor prior to Constantine, was a notorious persecutor. So this melding together for people who followed the way might well have sounded like good news. It allowed for the faith to spread more rapidly and easily. It became perfectly acceptable for Christians to assume roles within government. This, of course, also meant that the faith could, at times and in places, be pacified, and it was safe to profess one's belief in Jesus Christ. So that's the original Constantinianism. Of course, the empire didn't last, and people spread all throughout this world. And some have argued that the Massachusetts Bay Colony and other such colonies might well have been called neo-Constantinianism, a new kind of Constantinianism in the New World where church and state sometimes were meshed together. John Howard Yoder, a Mennonite theologian, called the 19th and early 20th centuries neo-Constantinianism because the church sought to bless society as a Christian society, not just a Christian country, but a Christian society, the sense that Christianity could direct the culture and therefore became an institution that wielded hegemony. Then there was the actual blessing of that society rather than the seeking to bless it, which was the three neos, neo-Constantinianism. Are you still with me? And then later there was the support of the church, from the church of the state intervening in political revolutions of third world countries in order to overthrow unjust regimes by whatever means necessary, which Yoder called neo-Constantinianism. And I would argue that the fifth iteration happened recently with the rise of modern evangelicalism, which fused the megachurch with the political activities of both Washington, D.C. and Israel, and sought to claim a moral agenda that could not be ignorant of the reality that you can't fit all people in a particular box, but didn't care and just went ahead and tried to do it anyway. I lived this in Colorado, where New Life Church and Focus on the Family had tremendous influence and openly talked about converting the city of Colorado Springs to Christianity so that Colorado Springs could be the first domino to fall. After Colorado Springs, we will convert the state. After the state, we will convert the nation, and then we can finally live into the Great Commission and convert the entire world. Which maybe even sounds good to some folks until you live the practical reality of that, which is, I don't know how to describe that. Do I need adjectives there? It is a matter of what you believe, not what you do. I think what's come into focus for me, not just in recent weeks, but with experience and time, is that what you say you believe has far less importance now to me than what you do. I have come to the conclusion, and I'm sure many of you have too, that human beings, far from being rational economic actors, are in fact completely irrational a lot of the time, do many baffling things that do not work in their self-interest on a very regular basis. I have also come to the understanding that litmus tests in religious circles harm people. They draw the circle too close. And my own journey has been one where I have recognized that allowing my beliefs to evolve has been an incredible gift from God. Whenever someone pins another down because they have changed their mind and it is an accusation rather than a commendation, it is an enormous problem. I care far less about what you believe than what you do. Oh, sure, it's great. It is great when we agree in principle about how things should work, and it's great when we can all affirm that God is within us and around us, but don't tell me, show me. Don't tell me that you're really into Jesus, because I've come to the conclusion that the people who really are into Jesus don't talk about it a whole lot. They have way too many things to do and people to help and prayers of gratitude to offer. They don't tell you that theirs is a Christian business or that they are a Christian business person. They show you, and they show you when they negotiate, and they show you when they sell, and they show you by how they treat their colleagues and employees and even potential rivals. I care far less about what you say you believe now. Constantinianism, whether it is the fifth or the sixth or the seventh iteration that we are now veering towards, is not the goal anymore. Or it shouldn't be. That ship has sailed. Most of us now know that trying to get Jesus into the White House is not the goal. Instead, I want to be clear about what I'm up to. I believe that we should firmly examine the intersection of faith and politics, but my frame of reference is built upon this idea that Constantinianism doesn't work very well for my own faith, and also getting me nailed down in precisely what I believe at all times and in all places doesn't help me and doesn't help our insistence that church and state be melded together when we do that. Rather, I think that we do better when we ask the state to do what it is supposed to do. Free church denominations, the Quakers, the Unitarians, the Mennonites, some Pentecostals, some Baptists, and the Congregationalists have consistently shared the belief in the separation of church and state and maintained a critical posture toward the state that asked the state to be modest. Just modest. The state is not God, but rather an instrument to promote human rights and a reasonable level of welfare. Or to put it even more bluntly, as Menno Simons said in the 16th century, the state's job is to protect the righteous and prosecute the wicked. The second calling for the church, shared among free church traditions, is to resist the state when the modest calling of the state is refused. When the state attempts to behave like God, that should be named. And so the church has a calling, and the calling is multifaceted and not passive. It's critical that now and in the future we speak to say that in light of who Jesus was and is and what we believe our role to be, that violence and brutality, deceit, and the compulsion to scapegoat others are forms of moral weakness rather than strength. The sword is not the source of our creativity. Civilization or society should be judged by its success in its ability to treat the foreigner with dignity and also how it tills the soil. There are more, and this is straight from John Howard Yoder, there are more useful ways to contribute to society than attempts to rule it. After all, Jesus once said, "You shall be one another's servants." The vision of the realm of God is to be salt and light, hot sauce and sunshine in the world right where we find ourselves. Our experience of life is there transformed, and it may even be transformed for another, but it is much more than where we find ourselves right here, right now. And that is why we still read from the prophets. You heard Barbara read from the prophet Isaiah, that beautiful vision. Ancient kings like King David, proved their worth in ancient times by killing large animals, especially lions. In his bid to fight Goliath, David demonstrates his credibility to Saul by saying, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth. And if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw." David was an impressive guy. I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them. But in the prophecy of Isaiah 11, there is no sense that this king, this future hope of the nations, will kill lions. The lions will be remade. The lion will be transformed. The lion's taste or instinct for violence will be reshaped to become an agent of peace. The lion will have the capacity to dwell with the lamb and the calf. The predatory instinct will now be removed. This is another kind of vision entirely, one removed, far removed from the hopes of the White House or our politics. in 2016. This is a very different kind of politics, one that does not ask us to quote a creed or state a belief in order to pass a litmus test. Instead, this is something that you and I are being asked to live into each day. And that is a very different kind of story. Peace be with you.